1, rolling.
Kids vs. Global Warming was started by Albuquerque when he was 12 years old after seeing Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. He's now 16, like myself, and since then he's talked to over 100,000 people about climate change. I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to work pretty closely with him, and he's one of the most amazing youth leaders of our time. This chart shows both how global temperature and CO2 concentrations have changed over time. Scientists measure these by looking at ice cores in the Arctic region, among other things. And by looking at this chart, you can see how closely the climate and CO2 levels have correlated over time. And this is an essential piece of understanding how greenhouse gases affect global temperature. As you can see, the CO2 levels have been erratic over the course of time, but they've stayed generally within the same range. But starting with the Industrial Revolution, they started to skyrocket. So if you're involved with climate, you've probably heard the number 350 getting tossed around. Leading climatologists like James Hansen from NASA say that 350 is the upper sustainable limit for parts per million of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, which is just a measure of how much we've got in the atmosphere. And unfortunately, we're already passing 391 rapidly, and at the rate that we're going, we could be up to around 500 by mid-century, at which point we'll all still be here, the younger generation, and that of course spells trouble for us. So here's what would happen. Climate change was initially identified as an environmental crisis because its most immediate effects would be the toll it takes on our environment. So, and on the natural world, beautiful landscapes and species that define our notion of the environment could be decimated within about 50 years. But it's more than just an environmental disaster. It affects cities and countries and each of us individually. From the catastrophic consequences like 1 billion climate refugees to the more local effects like the dry Santa Fe riverbed, climate change will be a big part of our lives and the lives of every generation to follow. In 2008, Bill McKibben, the founder of 350.org, came and talked at Albuquerque Academy, where I'm a student. Before his talk, I'd always had a soft spot for the environment, and I was part of the environmental club. But Bill McKibben's message was a huge wake-up call. Not only were we jeopardizing thousands of species and millions of lives and habitat spaces, but we were doing it all in the interest of our greedy, selfish, short-term goals for personal gain. And the consequences of that short-sightedness would happen during my lifetime. I realized we were doing the world a huge wrong, and it was up to me to right it. We know that climate change is a problem, but for many people it is still just an abstract concept that will affect us sometime in the future, whenever that is. Our generation is that future. Climate change defines the world that we will live in. But we are also here now. We can't wait until we are adults before we stand up for the future, because by then it will be too late. And our voices matter, because our generation is waking up to the fact that climate change, like each of us in this room, isn't just something of the future. It's here now. For years, we have patted ourselves on the back for recycling or changing our light bulbs. We have convinced ourselves that not putting a sheet of paper in the trash defines us as far-sighted environmental advocates. While I by all means encourage these actions, the climate crisis will take something bigger. In the words of Akilah, this revolution has to change the hardest thing of all, the way we think. We must change the way we view the world around us and our participation in it to build a comprehensively more sustainable future. Sustainability is being conscious of our actions and adjusting each one to be considerate of both today and tomorrow. Because you and I will be here to see that tomorrow. Scientists say we need to top out our CO2 emissions by around 2015 in order to get things turned around quick enough. Yes, there are skeptics. But there were skeptics of the civil rights movement, there are skeptics that we could put a man on the moon, and there are skeptics in the revolution that built this country. There will always be skeptics. But the skeptics of the civil rights movement saw the African American children of Birmingham tip the scales in the favor of equality. The skeptics of space travel saw the lunar landing. where the average age of the men in the control room was actually 26, and the skeptics of our independence saw us become a prosperous nation against all odds. Now, it's time for our generation to stand up and issue that same wake-up call, that we need to live on a planet where decisions are based on good, not gold, where our economy thrives on sustainable practices rather than wasteful infinite growth for temporary profit, where the lives of people are more important than the lives of corporate names, where we will be safe from the catastrophic consequences of climate change. And that's exactly what we're going to do. On Mother's Day 2011, which is May 8th, 1 million youth will march in the streets in their towns and cities, demanding that we as a planet live as if the future matters. We are the missing link in the climate movement. Our CO2 emissions are ours to deal with, or ours to stand up and fight against. The iMatter marches can focus on any part of climate change, the problems, the consequences, or the solutions. iMatter was based on a series of visual images that Alec Loers made, and here's a video. I've been working on the national level with Alec Loers and the rest of Kids vs. Global Warming, but we're going to organize here in Albuquerque too. We need a team of dedicated, passionate youth leaders who are ready to stand up and march for our future. I'll be organizing the iMatter event here in Albuquerque, so please see me after this if you want to get involved with planning, and come on May 8th we're going to be meeting at the Highland High School at 1 in the afternoon to march down Central to tell people that we need to live as if the future matters. Before I finish up, I want to show you a quick video of Alec Loers that I put together from a speech of his.
Most of the adults in this country still don't get it. Climate change is still too abstract and scientific and political to really care about. You know, Larry King actually said it plainly. When he said, a while ago, he said, "Nobody cares about what happens 50 years from now." Well, that's easy for him to say. He'll be dead. Sorry for all Larry King fans, but I won't be. My children and all of our grandchildren won't be. You know, despite the 46% of Americans who last year said they didn't even believe in global warming, climate change remains one of the most urgent threats of our time. And in 50 years, my generation will be stuck dealing with the consequences if we fail to act now. So I believe it's up to the youth to start a revolution and change the mindset of every person living on this planet. Thank you. And I've seen the same thing wherever I go. I've seen my entire generation has this inherent sense of calling that we have to do something about climate change. Most of them don't even realize it yet. But as the great David Brower once said, "I'm always impressed with what young people can do before older people tell them it's impossible." Because there comes a time in every generation where the need for change is thrust upon us. A time when civilization redefines itself to create a new way of living because the people have found that the old ways no longer bring life, hope, and happiness. Now is one of those times. And really it's about more than just climate change. It's about how we treat our planet as if the only thing that mattered is our own selfish, short-term interests. But this isn't about money or power. Climate change is about the survival of my generation and every generation to come. We as a species aren't living sustainably. And sustainability is a term a lot of people use to mean different things, but what it means to me is this: living as if the future mattered. Living our lives in a way that values trees, air, water, animals, and future generations just as much as short-term interests. And making decisions that are beneficial to this and every generation to come. I'm here to say that kids do know the facts, and we are taking action. There are youth in every city in the world working on innovative and powerful campaigns to bring us closer to the future we want. Kids have spoken at the UN, they've organized protests, they've started organizations and projects to save energy, invented green technologies, and even changed laws. We are already taking action. And throughout history, people who are affected the most by the unjust actions of the ruling class have stood up to demand that their voices are heard. And it has now fallen upon our generation to create a completely new way of living, so that the alternative energy is just energy, so that all jobs are green jobs, and so that this sustainable society that we've all been talking about is just a normal way of life for every human being on this planet. Now, every politician and business executive has children and grandchildren of their own. And only we, the youngest generation, have the moral authority to look into our parents' eyes and ask them, do I matter to you? Moms with babies in strollers, dads with their kids, teens empowered with the sense that their voices matter. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, teachers will stand together to issue a wake-up call that is so loud, so provocative, and so unquestioning that it will be impossible to ignore. I hear people say all the time, it's great to have kids involved. You guys are the future. And yeah, we are the future. But you know what? We are more than that. We're here now. We are the present, and our voices do make a difference. So let's now all work together. Who here is now ready to stand up, join across generations, and start a revolution that will change the world forever?
Like I said, we're going to have an iMatter march right here in Albuquerque, and I'd love to have some of you, youth and adults, to make this a multi-generational movement on board. Finally, before I go, I want to let each of you know that we have an iMatter app for the iPhone, iTouch, iPad. So if you're an Apple person, go to the App Store and take 5 minutes to download it. It's free. And my email is up here too if you want to get in touch. Or you can come see me after the presentation. Thank you so much for your time.